Walking alone the streets of hell. The only thing I can see is cold silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Feel like a dynamite, ready to explode right up in the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear, and don't show any fear. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been
Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for all the great work you've done for veterans and being a veteran yourself. I wanted to see if you'd take to the podium, share your message of hope with the American people.
I'd love to. Thank you, Kaylee, and thank you, President Trump, for allowing me to be here today. I've got a couple props. This is examples of one of our products that we make, and here's another one. This one my son, Gabriel, made. And when you talk about hope and what's going on,
If you take to the podium for a minute or two and share your message of hope with the American people.
I'd love to. Thank you, Kaylee, and thank you, President Trump, for allowing me to be here today. I've got a couple props. This is examples of one of our products that we make, and here's another one. This one my son, Gabriel, made. And when you talk about hope and what's going on, it's a challenging time for small business. We lost 2/3 of our revenue. Gone. And so trying to get that back, and when you think about a small business that's generally running maybe at 10 to 20%,
masks. There was some back and forth over the president wearing a mask yesterday. I don't want to ask about that, but the White House's view. What is the White House's message to the American people? Does the White House, does the president believe that people should be wearing masks as they try to get back to some semblance of their normal life?
Well, as we put out, it's recommended, but that's the choice of the individual as to whether they wear a mask or not. The president yesterday, the CEO of Honeywell, said that there was no need, and so he followed that advice and that guidance. And I would just note on the note of masks, 70 million N95 masks have been distributed across the country. 25 million rather, are what's used in the average year for our healthcare workers. So the fact that in a few weeks we've distributed nearly 3 times what is used in a year is extraordinary, and that's not to mention the 120 million surgical masks and the many other supplies that this president has put forward.
If I can just follow up, I'm sure you've seen in a number of polls, there's a huge difference between Democrats and Republicans over whether or not they think it's necessary to wear a mask in public. Do you have any sense as to why that would be?
No sense as to why that would be. That's the choice of the American public. It's the choice of the individual as to whether to wear a mask or not. But again, I'd praise the extraordinary work of this administration in distributing those masks and ensuring healthcare providers get them. Yes.
Kaylee, we were just talking about masks. You said at Honeywell, the president was told by the folks at Honeywell, as was the team, that they didn't need to wear masks. The reason he was told that was because the people who would be interacting with him had all been tested and had been shown to be negative before that took place. I guess, so the president had those circumstances. Obviously, he's the president. But why shouldn't all Americans who go back to work be able to get a test before they do to feel comfortable in their own work environment to be interacting with other individuals?
Yeah, well, let's dismiss a myth about tests right now. If we tested every single American in this country at this moment, we'd have to retest them an hour later and then an hour later after that, because at any moment you could theoretically contract this virus. So the notion that everyone needs to be tested is just simply nonsensical. The people who need to be tested are vulnerable populations. That's why Dr. Birx has repeatedly emphasized we need to surge nursing homes with the testing, meat processing facilities. That's where the testing is needed. We have to be strategic with our testing, and we have done that so far. And again,
Ra Nursery. Mày cười hả? Because we know that some of our underserved communities are hit most by the coronavirus. Absolutely, we've done quite a bit, invested, first of all, $1.4 billion into our nation's 13,000 community centers. That ensures that 28 million people living in medically underserved areas receive funding. Also, that announcement I had for you last week about hospital funding, $2 billion of that was geared towards specifically ensuring that men and women in underserved communities, and those hospitals got that money. And I would also note just that the president has directed Secretary Ben Carson to focus the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council on underserved communities. So very important. This is a community that's been very hard hit, and rest assured we are laser focused on making sure that these communities are assisted.
Can I ask about reopening as well? Sure. Okay. So the task force has put out phased guidelines for states to reopen and individual guidelines, but it hasn't said very much about businesses specifically. Does it plan to put out any detailed guidelines for businesses like retailers and restaurants to reopen?
Well, in the phased approach, there are some recommendations for how, for instance, restaurants should reopen and the distancing that's required. And as you go through the phases, that distancing is shrunk, and there are other mechanisms that are outlined for restaurants and movie theaters and sporting venues. So I would argue that our phased